And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Thursday, October 3rd, 2024. And we're going to start out with conditions here Friday morning, but to speak of, we have a powerful Bering Sea low that's actually the remnant of a tropical storm. And this system is going to be working its way initially eastward, passing between St. Matthew and St. Paul, and eventually dropping southeastward down across Unimak Island, Cold Bay area by the time we get into later Saturday night, early pre-dawn Sunday morning. This low, though, is going to bottom out near 950 millibars. It has storm and hurricane force wind gust associated with it. The strongest winds are in the western and southern quadrant of the low. It's really impacted areas here in the Aleutian chain under high wind warnings as a result. And we do have a high surf advisory for the Kuskokwim Delta coastline as we go through today and into Friday. This system, though, will slowly begin to weaken and then redevelop secondary development south of Kodiak Island and the other side of the Alaska Peninsula in the North Pacific as we get into the latter portion of the weekend on Sunday. But in the meantime, there will be a front out ahead of it, an occluded front that arcs ahead of it into the southwest coast, and then eventually that'll push up into the Gulf. We expect IFR conditions along the southwest coast, all the way from St. Lawrence Island down through the YK deltas in approaching Bristol Bay and along areas of the Alaska Peninsula. Also up along the Alaska Range, we have IFR as well as the Chugach Mountains and the Kenai Peninsula on up around Prince William Sound, and also south slopes here of the central eastern Brooks Range. We expect IFR conditions Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, still a broad area of IFR conditions over the southeast Bering Sea along the Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays, and especially north side of the Alaska Peninsula. We have IFR conditions holding along the central west arm of the Alaska Range and then out over the northwestern Gulf, including areas around Prince William Sound, the eastern Kenai. And into Saturday morning, we find with that front IFR conditions spreading eastward along the Gulf Coast from Prince William Sound all the way on over into especially the inner channels and the inner coastal mountains of the Panhandle. And then further west, we still have IFR conditions over the southeast Bering as that low on Sunday morning will be crossing, as I mentioned, Unimak Island and around Cold Bay. To the north, still IFR conditions along parts of the northwest Arctic coast, especially Cape Lisburne up toward Utqiagvik. And for Saturday afternoon, IFR conditions continue along the northern Gulf Coast into the inner channels of the Panhandle and the inner coastal mountains up against British Columbia. We still have IFR conditions lingering here in the southeast Bering, and also, again, along areas of the Chukchi Sea from Point Hope on up to and just east of Utqiagvik. So past conditions here for the east central Brooks Range, Anatuvik Pass, IFR to start out, becoming MVFR on Friday. Same thing, Attican Pass, IFR conditions early in the day, becoming MVFR. Lake Clark and Merrill will have IFR conditions there throughout the day Friday. Same thing, Rainy Pass on up through Windy Pass in the Alaska Range. As we go east, Isabel may come out and see MVFR conditions there on Friday, and further east, Mentasta Pass unaffected with VFR conditions likely. As we drop down through the Copper River Basin, especially the lower portion of the Copper River Basin, Tanita Pass, MVFR becoming IFR. And Portage Pass should generally hold on to IFR conditions, especially the eastern half of the pass on out into Prince William Sound. And then finally, in the far north of the Panhandle, there could be a brief period of IFR early Friday, giving way to MVFR conditions at both Chilkoot and White Passes. So freezing levels aloft, we have this low that's out here on Friday morning. Here's the occluded front arcing, and ahead of it we find freezing levels bump up 4,000 feet Kodiak Island all the way down into 10,000 feet there into the North Pacific. So it's not an exceptionally warm push of air that we sometimes get. Behind me you do see freezing levels aloft above 8, 10, even 12,000 feet, but well southwest of the Aleutian chain in the North Pacific. So as we take a look at areas of precipitation wrapped around the low, mainly in the form of rain with that frontal boundary, the occluded front, bringing bands of mainly rain showers, with the exception of once you get up into higher elevations in the mountains, then it would be snow. But generally speaking, here out over the southeast Bering, along the southwest coast, potential for icing in the thicker cloud, precipitation producing clouds above 4,000 feet, and then along the occluded front here in the western Gulf above 6,000 feet. Here's the wind field, and it's pretty notable at 30,000 feet. Here we have the low pressure trough at 30,000 feet, and then behind me we have a jet core upwards of 170 knots digging down along the backside of this trough. So that's what's allowing to intensify the system. As I mentioned, the low is expected to bottom out near 950 millibars later this Thursday into early Friday out here over the central Bering. But a very broad wind field. Even ahead of it at mid-levels, we find winds 40 to 60 miles an hour coming through some of the mountains there, the Alaska Range and in the Chugach. But along and south of the Aleutian chain, winds aloft are generally at 700 millibars, 9,000 feet. We're looking at 50 to 60 plus knot winds across the Aleutians, trying to push up into the Alaska Peninsula. And then at 3,000 feet on Friday, we expect some of the strongest winds still to be just south and southwest of the low center. So this would place areas, especially the eastern half of the Aleutians, pushing into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, to have the potential for turbulence. Also, we have the occluded front out here in the western and lower Gulf, a band of stronger winds of 40 to 50 knots. So looking at where the greatest threat for turbulence on Friday will be across the eastern back toward the central Aleutian, surface to 3,000 feet. Also severe turbulence around the Pribilov, St. Paul. Broad area moderate turbulence along portions of the west coast back towards St. Lawrence and St. Matthew. Also lower Alaska Range, Lake Iliamna, entrance of Cook Inlet, western, northwestern Gulf around the Kenai and Chugach Mountains, including Prince William Sound. We could find moderate turbulence, especially there, surface to 6,000 feet.